Hello everyone, welcome back to Skypothesis. We have something a little different for you today, our very first build for Path of Exile. Now, our channel is not going to become a Path of Exile channel, but I did want to share this with you because this is a game that I care a lot about, and hopefully it will inspire some of you to give this game a try. I personally think it's a masterpiece and one of the greatest games ever made. So we're still going to be an RPG-focused channel, but this was a build that I had a ton of fun with and wanted to make a video for. So this is a Dancing Dervish Occultist. I started last league with it, and it was a lot of fun and a really successful league starter, so I plan to do it again. Everyone plays this game for different reasons. Personally, I like playing around with more obscure skills. The hipster in me just has a lot more fun with them. So, a couple quick disclaimers. This is not a fully optimized build, it's intended to be a league starter. I do think the build is beginner friendly, but I will not be explaining all of the mechanics that a beginning player would need to understand in this video. So there's a Path of Building link in the description for the build, as well as the Path of Building community fork if you don't have it yet. And then last thing, this build is a minion build, and it's not super unique, but there are a couple things that I've done that I haven't seen a whole lot of other players do, so I figured it was still worth making a video for. The ultimate master of these sort of off-meta, obscure minion builds is Gazi, and I've linked a video in the description as well to his explanation of Animate Guardian, which is a minion that we will be using. I'll dig into more of that in a minute. Okay, so let's get started. This build is built around the unique two-handed sword, the Dancing Dervish. For how niche this item is, it got a surprising amount of attention from GGG last update, and it feels much better than it ever has. The sword grants you Rampage, which is a buff that begins after you kill several enemies in a row. When Rampage begins, the sword leaves your hands, splits into two, and becomes two spinning sword minions that attack by themselves. So Rampage boosts your speed and unleashes varying buffs depending on how many enemies you've killed before the timer runs out. Killing an enemy resets the timer, so as long as you are killing enemies, your swords stay active. Now previously, you had to get several kills in a row to trigger Rampage and get your sword minions. Now just hitting an enemy counts towards the Rampage kill counter, which makes it so much easier to activate your swords. All you have to do is Cyclone into a pack of enemies and it spawns your swords regardless of kill count. So huge quality of life improvement. In addition to the two dervishes, we have two other minions, Carrion Golem and Animate Guardian. Carrion Golem grants a buff to all other minions, raising their damage, and Animate Guardian is there to apply the Brittle mechanic to enemies. It also raises the damage of other minions and culls tough enemies. Culling Strike kills enemies less than under 10% health. His most important function is to apply Brittle, which effectively doubles your crit chance. This has been a pretty popular discovery this league, but it's just too powerful not to use. We'll go into the mechanics of how it works later in the video. Okay, now let's dig into the gear that we are using in our inventory here. Now the first piece, of course, is the Dancing Dervish sword itself, which is the first thing that you should buy. This is super cheap, and it's super cheap early in the league, so I think I got mine 1 or 2 days into the league for 5 Chaos Orbs, and that's with 6 sockets already. The really nice thing about these sort of items is these don't need to be linked together to support the skill. So we have increased critical damage, minion damage, cold penetration, elemental damage with attacks, added cold damage, and damage on full life. All are socketed in here, they don't need to be linked, and they support the dervishes. So that should be the first thing that you buy. The second thing should be the Triad Grip Gloves. Now, when this has 4 green sockets, it converts 100% of physical damage to cold damage for your minions. Now, it will be a bit pricey to get 4 greens. This is an off color for the item. It's a strength and intelligence based item, not a dexterity one, so hitting green sockets is harder. You can settle for 3 green sockets that you benchcraft and like 1 blue. That will take you surprisingly far into mapping. It just won't be optimized with all your cult penetration and stuff. So get a 3 green triad grip next after your dervish. And once you get those 2 items, you're honestly rolling. Because helmet, body armor, all your jewelry, and boots are all rare pieces that don't need anything super specific. As long as you're capping your resistances with those pieces and getting as much life as you can, you will be going far into red maps with just those items. Now for the belt, we are using the Darkness Enthroned, which boosts the effect of the 2 jewels that you socket into it. Now we are using Ghastly Jewels because they roll all the fun minion mods. These are very mediocre, but we have 2 Ghastly Jewels in here, and then 3 other Ghastly Jewel spots on our passive tree. So on these, you'll want life and flat physical damage. You can settle for kind of middle-of-the-road rolls because they all add up, and you're going to get 5 of them, and if you get 5 of them that have physical damage rolls in the teens, they're all going to add up, and they're going to add like 50 flat damage to your sword. And that's something that you can optimize later on once you're generating currency. About jewelry. So we don't really need anything specific, just life, resistances, and probably dexterity. You won't get enough dexterity on the passive tree, so you'll need it somewhere on your gear. Now you'll want at least 1 unset ring so that you can put determination here. There really isn't any other place in your inventory for determination. Now I did have another unset ring over here, but it wasn't as necessary because I thought I was going to use Convocation a lot more, but I never needed it. Your swords fly and are immune to damage, and they're super fast, so I just never used Convocation, so I took it off. I've just been putting in the best ring that I found along the way, and as you can see, I haven't really found any good rings. Now Amulet, same thing. Life and resistances. An optimized version would raise the level of your skills, but I didn't optimize the amulet slot, obviously. Now Helmet is where we are putting our Animate Guardian. Animate Guardian is linked to Elemental Army, Minion Life, and Predator. Now, you'll want your helmet to have this mod, +3 to level of socketed minion gems. You can only roll that on an item level 86. Otherwise, the maximum is +2 to level of socketed minion gems. The higher the level of the gem, the more life the Animate Guardian has, and the longer he stays alive. Now, I didn't really prioritize this, and as you can see, I still have a level 20 Animate Guardian, and that's been fine, because this has been a farming character, not really a boss-killing character, so that's honestly less of a priority. If you want to turn this build into an endgame boss killer, then you're going to need to make some big upgrades. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Honestly, just really just don't put anything expensive on your Animate Guardian and you don't need to worry about it. So the chest piece, again, life, resistances, nothing else really needed. We have Cyclone linked to Cast While Channeling, Flesh Offering, and Desecrate. This creates corpses, which you then explode, and down here we have Assassin's Mark linked to Mark on Hit. So you cyclone through a pack of enemies, and you'll apply Assassin's Mark to like tough rares and unique enemies, which will really boost your crit chance. So this is where holding down one button comes into play. You hold down Cyclone and you're casting Desecrate, you're exploding corpses with Flesh Offering, you're applying Assassin's Mark on Hit, and you're also hitting enemies, generating Rampage stacks. So I really like these automated builds where you just hold down one button and the build just happens. So that's a lot of fun. Okay, the boots, you want movement speed, life, and resistances. We have Summon Carrion Golem linked to Feeding Frenzy, as well as Frostbite linked to Blasphemy. One thing to note, try to get as much energy shield as you can on these items. The more energy shield, the better. Ideally, you'll have an energy shield base on all of these, because that energy shield all adds up and it provides a nice layer of defense. We didn't really talk about the gems and the Triad Grip. So we're a bit limited because they have to be green. So we're using dash, even though dash isn't my favorite movement skill. It's kind of the only one that we can use because of the gem color. So we have dash linked to second wind, and then precision and hatred. Now this makes 4 auras. We have hatred, precision, the blasphemy frostbite, and determination. Now we are able to do that because of the combination of a couple passive nodes on our tree, as well as this item, which is the third thing that you should probably prioritize getting, a cluster jewel that includes the skill Spiteful Presence. Spiteful Presence halves the reservation of hatred. So because of Spiteful Presence, the armor mastery for determination over here, and the reservation mastery up here in the sovereignty cluster, all those things add up and they allow us to squeeze 4 auras into our mana. Okay, now let's talk about flasks. This is super flexible. You'll want a life flask for bleeding, of course, and you'll want 1 writhing jar. The writhing jar spawns worms that your enemies can kill, which allows you to maintain your rampage stacks during downtime or right before the boss arena. While you're waiting for him to spawn, you can pop your writhing jar. Now, as you can see, it is replenishing on its own, which is because of 2 passive nodes. Here, the Flask Mastery, which it gives you 1 charge every 3 seconds. And down here, we have Anointed Replenishing Remedies, which gives you 2 charges every 3 seconds. So, the combination of those allow you to maintain your life flasks without killing anything, which is super awesome for survivability. The other flasks are just a super fast movement speed that lasts a long time, an instant recovery flask, and an armor flask that just happens when you use a life flask. So this is super flexible, you can use whatever you want here. Okay, now let's talk about Animate Guardian. So I did something a little bit different with him. I gave him the unique one-handed axe Relentless Fury, which has Culling Strike built into it, and since that's such a cheap item, you can get a corrupted version with the chance to fortify on hit implicit. So that saves us 2 gem slots, Culling Strike and Fortify. Now, in his offhand, he is using a Cold Attuned Buckler, which applies Brittle on block, and that's his main function. We're going to raise his block chance really high with passive nodes. The shield itself, you can swap out Flesh Offering for Spirit Offering, and one of your upgrade pieces that you can shoot towards is a jewel called Fortress Covenant, which is a little bit pricey, but it's something that you can upgrade to. I think they're like 40C towards the beginning of the league, so not something that you'll have early on, but something to shoot towards. So he's going to have almost capped block, which makes it super easy to apply Brittle. Now, we do have Predator linked to the Animate Guardian, so we can use Signal Prey here to tell him where to go, so we can make sure he's always up close and personal with the bosses and applying Brittle really often, and also getting Culling Strike as soon as possible. So for the rest of his gear, I gave him Leercast for the headpiece, which boosts damage by 10% for allies, and then the rest were just rare pieces with high life and resistance. Now, I did make some other upgrades to mine. I gave him the Crown of the Tyrant and the Doppelganger's Guise, which was probably not very smart because I still had a lot of other upgrades to do on my own character, but whatever, I just wanted them. Crown of the Tyrant adds a pile of cold damage if the socket is green, and Doppelganger's Guise really boosts your chaos and physical damage negation. Now, the obvious upgrade is to give him boots with brittled ground implicit, and also yourself, honestly. Both you and your Animate Guardian should be wearing boots with the brittled ground implicit. You really benefit from brittle, so that is kind of a no-brainer. It is pricey, and part of me was suspecting that GGG was going to nerf it, so I kind of continued on with the build using Cold Attuned Buckler as the primary way to apply Brittle, but it sounds like GGG isn't going to do any balance passes this round, so I guess we'll get Brittled Ground Boots for another league. So they're super OP, so might as well use them. So Brittle is an interesting mechanic. When you brittle an enemy, you are applying a flat chance to crit. So there's a couple ways to do it. If you're doing it from getting a block on a cold attuned buckler, or by the enemy stepping on your brittled ground that you leave behind when you're walking around with those boots on, then the enemy will have a flat 5% chance to crit added to them, and that is the base crit, and that will stack with whatever crit chance is on your weapon. Now 5% doesn't sound like a lot, but the base crit for the Dancing Dervish is 5%, so your new base chance to crit is 10% against enemies that have been brittled, and that is before any additional multipliers like your Precision Aura and your Assassin's Mark. So it will double your crit chance, and you really notice the damage skyrocket when the enemy gets brittled. Okay, for the Pantheon, I recommend going with the Soul of the Brine King for that stun avoidance and freeze immunity. That's always nice. And then for the Minor God, I picked Soul of Rislatha. This is the best choice for a couple reasons. We are already regenerating life flask charges, so why not add some more? And then the secondary effect, 60% increased life recovery when on low life from flasks. That stacks really nicely with this mastery right here. 50% increased recovery when on low life. So 110%. When you get to low life and you hit a life flasks, it refills up to pretty much full, and you just have that on command. For Bandits, I recommend killing all 3 in Act 2 for the 2 extra passive points. For the Ascendancy node order, I recommend taking Profane Bloom first, Void Beacon second, Malediction third, and then Vile Bastion fourth. Now this is personal preference. I've seen a lot of other cold minion builds choose to go with Frigid Wake, which is totally legit. That if you do this, then you can get another Pantheon power. But I don't know, Vile Bastion seemed more useful to me because I ended up with a lot more energy shield than I thought I would. And this 1000 shield just regens all the time. And if I had better gear, I could probably push towards 2000 energy shield, which would really improve survivability in the late stuff. So I think Vile Bastion's the better option, but that's just personal preference. Now, for leveling, I recommend playing whatever minion you want. I personally like Summon Raging Spirits and Zombies and Spectres, and just cramming as much as I can. You'll want to come along here to the Sacrifice Cluster and Spiritual Command Cluster early, and then I recommend taking these 2 nodes and jumping over here to the Purity of Flesh and Sovereignty clusters. This will allow you to get Hatred and Blasphemy Frostbite early. That way you'll be able to level quickly, because you'll benefit from having Profane Bloom and Blasphemy running together, and Hatred will add all that cold damage to your minions, so it'll make for a really smooth leveling experience if you do this. And then you're right here by these awesome damaged minion nodes. So other than that, you can just kind of fill out the rest of these masteries. The masteries are super important. The order that you get these doesn't really matter. As long as you get Sovereignty before you're running Blasphemy and Hatred, then you will be golden, because Profane Bloom just makes for such a smooth leveling experience. And then this cluster jewel down here, this is super flexible. Vicious Bite is definitely the best notable. We want crit chance, so this is the best one. Not something that needs to be prioritized though. The most important piece is this one, Spiteful Presence. This is where I put Fortress Covenant. Again, not a piece that you need to prioritize getting, but definitely an awesome one to get when you get those extra Chaos Orbs. Alright, and with that, we are ready to wrap up the video. So in the interest of keeping this at least relatively short, I'm not going to dig into the specifics on leveling. There are a lot of videos on how to level minion builds on YouTube. They're all done pretty much the same. You don't need anything specific. I like using Summon Raging Spirits just because I think that's a fun skill, but you could do Skeletons, Absolution, a lot of other options. And just to reiterate, this is a League starter, and it's fun, and it's cheap, and it's off meta. I will be playing it at the start of this league tomorrow, and if you want to give this game a try, feel free to send me a message in-game, and I'll invite you to our guild. It's kind of made for newer players who prefer to play solo, but we have a shared stash so we can swap items around and help each other out. And again, this is not going to become a common thing for our channel. I just wanted to share this with you because I think this game is awesome. We are definitely going to make more videos for Bethesda games before the launch of Starfield, so stay tuned. And yeah, with that, thank you for watching. Thank you for being subscribed to our channel, and hopefully I will see some of you in-game.